I pray for Congressman Conyers and his family and wish them well. However, Congressman Conyers should resign.
I thought it was time 3 days ago. I talked with him in person and told him then I thought it was in his best interest.
So yes, I think he should resign. I think he should resign immediately. I've just been briefed on the torrent of allegations, and I think he should.
3 top House leaders publicly calling for Michigan Congressman John Conyers, a founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus, as well as the Dean of the U.S. House, calling him to resign for sexual misconduct allegations. Conyers has been hospitalized since late Wednesday due to stress, but the pressure for him to resign intensifies, and of course that increased after a woman who accused him of sexual harassment went public on NBC's Today show. She broke a confidentiality agreement that she had signed to speak about this on NBC.
Some of the things that he did were, it was sexual harassment, violating my body, propositioning me, inviting me to hotels with the guise of discussing business, and then proposition me to, for sex.
I know there was a time in 2005, you say you were in a Chicago hotel room. Can you tell me what happened?
Well, it was the same kind of thing. He invited me into the hotel, and he has undressed, down to his underwear. And again, it was the proposition of sexually satisfying him. And
he asked you to do something sexually?
Yes.
And that is Marion Brown, the former staffer who filed a wrongful dismissal complaint in 2015 after she said she'd been fired for refusing Conyers' sexual advances. She received a $27,000 settlement, which was first reported last week by BuzzFeed. Conyers' attorney, Arnold Reed, told reporters the congressman is not focused on resigning, but on his health, and he dismissed Brown's accusations.
First of all, it is not up to Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi did not elect the congressman, and she sure as hell won't be the one to tell the congressman to leave. That decision will be completely up to the congressman. He's not thought about that. He's thinking about his health. He's thinking about getting well. She had an opportunity 15 years ago to come out, and she didn't. But she is jumping on the bandwagon now. Sexual harassment, again, is wrong in any form or fashion. Let me be clear. That is the congressman's view, and any sexual harassment should be ferreted out and eliminated with all due deliberate speed.
Joining us right now on the phone from D.C. is Democratic Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. Congressman Clyburn, glad to have you back on NewsOne Now. First and foremost, earlier, Nancy Pelosi talked about due process when she was on Meet the Press on Sunday with Chuck Todd. Said that the Ethics Committee should look into these allegations. You previously also talked about the issue of due process. Why should Congressman John Conyers resign now and not wait for the Ethics Committee to investigate what took place?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Let me be clear here. I have said that all of these allegations are serious. They must be taken seriously, and they should be investigated thoroughly. Now, you may know in my past, before I came to Congress, I supervised the investigation of over 2,000 sexual harassment complaints. And I know that these things are serious. They can destroy lives. I've seen families broken up over them. And so we have to be very careful. And so that's what was my advice when I sat down with the congressman. And I want to say, we can only advise, we can counsel, we cannot do anything more than that. His attorney is correct. His constituents elected him. Now, here in the Congress, we did elect him to be ranking member, and he removed himself from that post And that was the only thing that we really had the authority to take away from him. Now it's between him, his family, and his constituents. But that doesn't mean that this issue is going to get better. It is not going to get better. If anything, it's going to get worse. Now, last week when I was talking, there was one issue, maybe two or three issues. But after yesterday, Ms. Brown breaking the confidentiality agreement, and she was believable to me, I advised him again that it's in his best interest to step away from this institution that he was such a tremendous member of for more than half a century. So it's in his best interest, in his health interest, and I can't make him do it. My advice to him, though, is that it's in his best interest to do it.
So last week, we saw the story being reported in terms of what she said took place.
Right.
The difference here is that now we have a face to go with last week's report. But if what she said last week, without knowing who she was and what she looked like, and then now we have yesterday, we now know what she looks like and then what she said, really what has changed from last week to this week? Because if the idea of let due process continues, if that was the argument last week, isn't that still the argument this week?
Sure, it's still the argument, and I don't blame him for pursuing that. His attorney is doing what he's supposed to do. That doesn't mean that this is going to get any better. This is not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. And I think it's in everybody's best interest, especially that of the congressman, to really step away from this. That's just my advice, Roland. He doesn't have to take it, but that's what I believe. And I think I know enough about the process up here, and I think I know a little bit about life. And these things just don't get better. That's what I learned in trying to supervise over 2,000 of these things. It's not going to get any better. Is
this a matter of where Democrats, obviously with that criticisms against President Donald Trump, the women who accused him of sexual harassment, where this is now on their doorstep, and also are you, as well as Nancy Pelosi or even Speaker Ryan, are you also calling on Senator Al Franken to resign, or is that separate or different than what Congressman John Conyers is being accused of?
It may not be different from what he's being accused of, but it's different for me. I'm a member of the House of Representatives. We can determine who served in our body. Franken is in the Senate, and I'm going to let the Senate take care of the Senate business, and I'm just speaking for the House. And so I'm not going to have anything to say about what the Senate should or should not do. I may feel it, but I'm not going to publicly express it.
Last question. You said you talked to him. When did you last talk to Congressman John Conyers directly in advising him he should resign?
It may have been Tuesday. I think it's Monday or Tuesday, whenever we got back up here. I think it was Tuesday.
All right. Congressman Jim Clyburn, we sure appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go to our panel. Michael Brown, Democratic strategist and former vice chair of the DNC Finance Committee. Tiffany Cross, managing editor and curator and publisher for The Beat. And Bishop Harry Jackson Jr., senior pastor, Hope Christian Church in Beltsville, Maryland. To the question that I pose the congressman, okay, Marion Brown comes out, so we now know who she is. She breaks the agreement. She talks about what took place, which is the exact same what we heard about last week. So last week, it was due process. Nancy Pelosi goes on Meet the Press, highly criticized for calling Conyers an icon, and then all of a sudden the criticism now it's, oh, he needs to resign, now we believe her. Again, to all three of you, what's different from last week where it was due process, allow it to work itself out, in this week?
Well, I think the court of public opinion weighed in, and I also think that Nancy Pelosi was in a very challenging position. I mean, she has had some challenging relationships with the Congressional Black Caucus, and so I don't think that she was in a position when she was on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd to call for his resignation then without consulting with those leaders, because she didn't want to alienate that sector of the congressional body. She did err, though. I think we did know about Melanie Sloan at the time that she was asked about these allegations, and you know, I will say very delicately, I've worked in politics for 20 years now, and these stories have been surfaced about John Conyers long before they made headlines in newspapers and local news. So I don't think the Congressional Black Caucus wanted to be in a position to be an apologist for someone with these types of accusations. And I do, Roland, think there is a difference between John Conyers' case and Senator Al Franken.
What's the difference?
Well, John Conyers was in Congress when these allegations happened. Al Franken was not. He was a private citizen at that time. And I do think that that makes a difference. This is the institution that's determining if you can remain in this institution for things that you've done while you were here. Al Franken was not in the institution of Congress when he was accused of making lewd comments and gestures, etc.
Well, but Bishop, what's interesting is, though, in other cases, we have seen individuals who have lost jobs, lost opportunities as a result of actions that took place on a previous job, and so. I've been looking at different accounts on social media where people are saying, "Wait a minute, how are you now moving the goalposts where it's different for Conyers and it's different from Franken?"
Well, I think this is a very delicate situation. I do think he needs due process because we were setting standards. Evidently, the moral goal lines are being changed with a redefinition of marriage, all kind of things in our nation. Folks have got to decide how bad is sexual harassment. I think it's very bad. There should be boundaries. There should be penalties. In a sense, there should be public shaming. But you don't want to fall back into the era when black folk were lynched because somebody said, "You raped me," and everybody would just assume you're guilty, and away you go. I want due process.
But Michael, let's be honest here. We're dealing with politics, and that is Democrats see what's happening in the Roy Moore case. You have people who are highly critical of them saying, wait a minute, how can you be criticized Roy Moore for allegations against him, but then you don't call for Conyers to resign? But here's, I think, is something that's very interesting here that I think is important. So yesterday on Fox News, Neil Cavuto was talking to Senator Ted Cruz, and he asked them, and in fact, I'm going to go ahead and do this here. I'm going to try to set it up here. But what's interesting is he asked him, should Franken resign? First he said, "You cool working with alleged child molester Roy Moore?" Cruz says, "Sure, no problem. That's up to the voters." And what about alleged groper Al Franken? Now that's a very serious problem. I'm extremely concerned. So, from a political standpoint, what you have here is Republicans are about power. Their deal is, look, they understand if 52-48 in the Senate, Roy Moore absolutely matters. Democrats, in this case, are very righteous, if you will, by saying we don't care. One party makes it clear this is about power. Another party is saying, no, it's about what's right. That's what Democrats are really dealing with on this.
It is an extremely difficult issue, and in full disclosure, just like you, Congressman Conyers has probably known me since I was 5 years old, and so I have a lot of affinity for him, and hopefully he gets better. I hope his health improves. But clearly, America is changing relative to the tolerance level of what happens in the workplace, and we all have to understand that those standards are now different. And we also, as the bishop mentioned, there have to be some kind of watershed moments relative to when somebody's taking a picture and their hand slides down somebody's back. Is that harassment? How bad is that? How bad is pedophilia? There have to be different standards relative to sexual assaults and harassment. In this case with Congressman Conyers, it seems that there does seem to be this understanding that whether the term is due process, even though these aren't courts of law.
Right.
But there is some kind of, they're already talking about Roy Moore being seated and then having some kind of ethics investigation if he wins. So I don't know why everyone wouldn't be treated the same relative to getting their day in whatever, I'm using the word court, we know it's not court, but certainly in public opinion, and then let the chips fall where they may. But clearly, The women that I've seen on all these different cases, I believe them all. And I think we have to have zero tolerance for this stuff in the workplace, and we'll see let the chips fall where they may.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no.
That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.